to control that, or is that still going to be controlled by you guys?
I would suggest, if you can, Andy, that you control the PowerPoint. The only reason for that is sometimes it can be disjointed otherwise, just because then you're saying, hey, Carmen, can you, yeah.
Okay. Can I stipulate I'm on my iPad in terms of Zooming, so I'm not actually, don't have that on. The capability is somewhat limited, I guess, in terms of that.
No problem. I can do that for you then.
G'day, Andy. G'day, Carmen.
Kia ora, Mark.
Kia ora. I was going to ring you last night, but I thought, well, there's not much we can do at this point. So,
yeah.
In 2 seconds, I just dropped a button somewhere.
I did that really wrong, Carmen. I should have just said, Carmen, are you able to control the PowerPoint for me?
No, that's all fine.
Thanks. How are we doing today, Mark?
What was that, Andy?
How are we doing today?
Good, mate. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks. Hoping it's only a 3-dayer, but yeah. We already had
stay home.
Mike from Vinny's ringing saying, oh my God, is your fund still going? We're going to lose all this money.
Really quick, we are live streaming, so just letting you know.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All good.
Just making sure we're not going to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No problemo. But yes, I already had some calls.
Yeah.
This morning.
Yeah, I know the Kai Collective are meeting today to talk about what everyone's kind of ability is right off the bat. And so we'll have some clarity this afternoon so we can touch base.
I saw Pātaka Kai closing the pantries for 3 days.
Mm.
The rest of the team seem okay. They're saying that in a level 4, it's actually a little bit easier to manage from a visitor perspective as well in the destinations, because it's just closed, you know.
Yeah.
There's not sort of some people there, some people not, etc.
Oh, your level 4 is much easier for us to manage, particularly polls, because level 2 at polls is really complicated.
I bet.
Especially with the learn to swim.
Why couldn't they have pulled a lockdown while we were doing maintenance? Now that would have helped.
Even your breakfast, Mark, or morning tea.
No, just breakfast, sorry.
Second breakfast.
I've got a microphone that picks up every chew as well, sorry.
I went to a conference yesterday in Palmerston North. I left at 1 o'clock, got there at 6 o'clock, turned around, came home, got home at 12.
Oh. Right.
It was a great day.
Oh, no.
Road tripping, eh?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, Rob.
Morning, Rob.
Got your new car in the background there, Rob.
Yeah, it's my Mark III.
Mark III.
Mark III, which I remember my dad owning as a back in the 60s and 70s. Mark III, he had a Mark III Zodiac, a black one.
Yep.
So that's the old bus station.
Is it?
Where, what's there now? The Centre Place, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the railway station ran just down the back. You get to the rail station underground just by walking down that covered walkway and down some stairs.
Man. I saw a Mark III Zephyr outside the base last weekend. Actually, they're still around.
Yep, there's a few around.
No, we were the Holden family. We had the old HQ and EH and all that sort of stuff going on.
An orange one? Was it an orange one?
No, dark green was ours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hey, Dave.
Good morning.
Good
I'm already
morning.
missing the petrol fumes and sights of other cars.
You will be. Yeah, I bet your road's quiet today.
I slept in, there was no traffic noise.
Brilliant.
Morning, everyone.
It's the best
G'day,
thing
Ewan.
about lockdown is the lack of cars.
How did your chocolate and raspberry cake or whatever you make turn out?
I made 4.
Mm.
I have to confess they're the frozen ones, so I didn't really make them. I just cooked them.
You lied to us, Wilson. You lied.
Mate, I had pictures of you with a chef's hat on and flour and everything going everywhere.
No, I'm sorry. No, the fact that you have to take something frozen and put it in the oven constitutes cooking in my
It
book.
does these days.
But I cooked 4 and then I just devoured all 4. Monique didn't even care.
You panic ate.
Yeah, they're very nice.
Hey, do you want me to kick this off, guys? I've got an apology from Sarah here who has to leave at 10. She's got a guest lecture on. It's all very exciting. Sarah, are you doing a lecture?
Oh, just like a interlude, 20-minute guest lecture for the judicial review paper at the uni.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we might rip into this. It's Andy. I'm presuming you're taking this. Is that right?
That's correct.
So essentially,
Sorry to just interrupt. I just jumped on really quickly just to make sure that everyone is all good with the COVID messaging that's gone out. There's no questions so far. David was planning on just having a quick jump on this morning, but he's been caught up somewhere else. But yeah, I'm here if you've got any questions that you need answered straight away. Otherwise, it's pretty much business as usual. We've done this before. Yeah.
Yep. And the by-election is a week later, and
It is a
rubbish
week.
days are still on. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Suspense.
I know. I pity them, mate.
That gets rid of worrying whether they'll want to vote on Monday.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done.
Poor
Becca.
candidates, though, because they've got now another week to do campaigning that they might not have budgeted for either, or have the energy, frankly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of one of those situations where we sort of had to weigh up the pros and cons of, voter turnout and being able to exercise the democratic right and the difficulties with candidates. But yeah, we definitely sympathise, and we are in contact with the candidates.
It could be the best thing ever for the election. You could have a better turnout than you've ever had.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. She's optimistically.
The
Okay.
comms have been great, Becca.
Yeah.
I always really appreciate the work you guys do. So thank you.
Thanks, you, and I'll pass that on to the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll leave you guys now to get stuck into Andy's session. Thanks.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So it's timely. Every year we review the disability policy. And Andy, the floor is yours.
Cool. Thanks, councillors. So we actually don't review the policy every year, Mark. It's scheduled for review next year, but really kind of aware of the interest from the elected members in terms of making sure that our policies are fit for purpose and appropriate, that we're in the work that we're doing across the whole of council staff and elected members, that we're hitting your guys' expectations and we're meeting our community expectations as well. Carmen, can you just flick to the next slide, please? So today's purpose really is just about us hearing from you, so that when we bring to the community committee any revised policy, that it's right the first time, rather than having to do lots of back and forth changes. So I've sent through in the briefing documents links to our current policy. There's a little bit of benchmarking that we've done with some of our metro partners. And there's really a little bit of work around what does monitoring and actions look like from a different perspective. Can we go to the next one, Carmen, please? Just a reminder for everyone, our current policy is not overly long and wordy. There's essentially the 6 elements here that is the commitment of what we will do. There's about, and just prior to this, there is elements of what the principles look like. The fact that we are endeavouring to make sure that we get better that we are responsive to our community, that we are doing the right forms of advocacy, and we're making improvements across all things that we've got a mandate to do. And then the policy here is relatively strong worded in that, as you read that, those elements aren't up for debate. Those elements are, this is what we will do. But I appreciate that we could reword some of this so that our community knows with confidence that we will be committing to doing these actions. Next slide, please, Carmen. One of the things that I think I've heard a few times from elected members is ensuring how are we closing the loop and how are we telling the stories of the work that is going on. We are all involved in situations with our community where we go, that could have been done better. Sometimes that's a structural thing that can be changed or may not be able to be changed in the short term and needs to be factored in. Other times it's a simple fact that something got wrong and we can own our mistake and then make sure that we don't do it again. In terms of what we've done previously, we've had an annual action plan that we've brought to the community committee, showing both what we've done in the previous 12 months, what is scheduled to happen in the upcoming 12 months, and then every sort of 2 months in between that annual meeting, our community and staff meet to really make sure that our projects are on track and that we are making the right kind of headway. Also, those meetings are held as a way that some of our community members are able to bring forward other concerns or situations that they're experiencing, and we can talk through how best to rectify that. We kind of go from a policy perspective, some of those topics feel really correct. They feel really right. That I don't, in my professional opinion would be that we are actually hitting the mark when we say that we're going to make sure that all of our communications are aligned and that they're in the most appropriate, accessible formats, that our infrastructure managed by us will meet the needs of our people, that our facilities is accessible, meets best practice. Where I think lots of our other councils do things slightly differently, and there's opportunity, is what level of interaction do the elected members want with our advisory group. Auckland, for instance, has a subcommittee where there's a couple of elected members and some representatives that meet quarterly, and it is literally a committee of council, through to other councils who do what we have done of having that community and staff working quite closely. And then there's mixtures of all three kind of meeting together. I know that there's opportunities and tools in our toolbox, really, and when we're talking with our community of how do we partner with DPA, and is that a staff partnership or is that elected member partnership? But really the questions that I have for you, and I really want to hear feedback on, is do you think our policy is hitting the mark, or are there changes that you see, particularly around this monitoring and ongoing visibility? Have we got this right? From a long-term plan budget, there's about $29 million set aside this year on renewals and capital projects that will have effect for our disabled community. And that's a range of things, from the transport centre upgrade through to some of our low public transport initiatives, our minor initiatives, through to some of the work around like the museum's entrance. And so there's opportunities already that we've factored into the long-term plan budget. And I guess we want to make sure that you guys have confidence that the conversations you're having with our community are genuine and accurate, and that the good stories that are going on, and where we are planned to do improvements. So that's kind of my brief, here's what we've got, but really, really keen to hear from you all in terms of what direction you'd like us to go when we bring the review back to the committee.
Andy, are you quite happy with the info and the intel you're getting from the disabled community? As you'll be aware, Sarah's in particular, Sarah, you've been talking with people who are after a stronger advocacy group from the disability sector, and maybe panels or that kind of thing. Can we sort of touch into that one?
Yeah, I guess so. At this point in our review, we haven't done, just put it on the table. We haven't had lots of conversations with our community around what they would want us to be putting forward to you. I wanted to make sure that I was hearing correctly before making some level of promise with our community. As you're aware, Mark, we're across our community, different people will have different avenues into council. And so what we're all hearing may be slightly different. So there is definitely importance of us having that connected conversation that's stronger. I know that there's a couple of councils who have paid positions, which are like those real strong advisory. The Auckland model, again, is, that really set apart. They are the publicly nominated expression of interest process. The community knows who our, representatives are. So there's definitely opportunities that we could pursue, but I didn't want to make any of those promises without having clear direction from you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Dave, you got your hand up, Commandant.
Yep. Thanks, Andy. I sort of get the sense, because there's no elected members involved in this advisory group, I'm not sure where this gets reported to. I don't mind. I don't particularly want to be on it, or maybe no others do. But does this come back as a matter of course every 6 months with a report on the implementation, how it's gone in the last 6 months, anywhere like that? Because it's a little bit, we set a policy, we have a couple of wins with the buses or whatever, and then we forget about it until the next annual workshop sort of thing. How do we elevate? So my issue is not whether you're on the right track or not, because I'm not 100% sure. I forget what the track is that you're on.
Yeah, we could definitely look at how do we do that monitoring, and whether that's a part of our GM update to committee, on a regular basis, or whether that's a standalone report. I guess we can look at making sure that some of the things on our action list are long-term things, and so they don't have regular updates, but other projects are moving at pace. And so I think there is good opportunity for us to make sure that what we're hearing from a staff level is being communicated well to you.
Yeah, you mentioned a $29 million program, so I'm not sure whether that gets reported separately to finance or anywhere else. And I recognise that some of them will be at the back end of the LTP and that, but some of the planning will be happening now, and perhaps the issue there wouldn't just be what HCC is doing, but what is happening in our community. What's the regional council doing? What's the development community doing in terms of accessible new buildings? Things like that being highlighted as well in a report.
Yes. Yeah, currently our report is very much, the policy is focused on what we will do as council. So our reporting has generally been more on what we have done, but we can definitely ensure that the next report has a little bit more of that breadth to it as well.
That sort of becomes important for the disability community's viewpoint. They don't really care which body is responsible for what piece of work or policy. They just care about whether the outcomes meet the needs. And I think we should take that sort of approach. I won't belabor the point anymore, but I think it's too restrictive just to think about HCC. That's me.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else? Sarah, do you want to chip in here while you're still with us?
Yeah, thanks, Mark and Andy. In terms of the structure for the advisory groups, I guess I don't have a really strong view as to how it should at this stage how it should look. But what I have heard is that there's that from some of those in DPA, they want to have a slightly stronger voice or input. But what that looks like, I feel like I'd really like to just hear from them very clearly what they think could improve that channel into council. So, for me, it's more just understanding what they feel would be really useful, but at the same time, not wanting to create an unnecessarily kind of bureaucratic or encumbersome process. So it's something that, is effective without being necessarily setting up, very formal. It doesn't necessarily have to be extremely formal. So I think we should consider some remuneration, whichever one that is, at least consider it, because for a lot of these people, it's similar when we look for cultural advice as well. We're always kind of going back to people in the community for essentially their expertise, but never acknowledging the time that they give, and they're a valuable, they're continually providing free services to us in terms of the advice they give. So it's something to at least consider, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Anyone else got any queries or contributions on this point? We're talking about the accessibility to the groups, whether their channels are open, do they have enough voice, and is our reporting back to the, satisfactory to us as elected members. And I guess the thing that I'm quite interested in is that, you're right. I think you hit it on the head, Andy, where, we all get different bits of intel from different friends in different sectors. So it's a matter of channeling all that so it's the most useful, because there's politics in that community as well too, aren't there? So it's,
like Dave said, it would be quite useful, even if they're just meeting with our staff directly, to have some info coming through and to understand not just their response to what we're already doing, but actually what are their aspirations in terms of, issues that we need to be thinking about in the future. So, for an example, with, what would we want kind of the future state of our transport system to look like in terms of accessibility, and addressing issues of people parking on footpaths or having enough crossings at busy road points and stuff. So it's because I think right now we reporting on kind of what we have done and what is already in motion, whether it be through the LTP or current work streams, but to be able to capture what they are wanting in terms of, us to future aspirations, and that could guide our future decisions. That would be really useful.
Paula,
I guess.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just a quick response in terms of that. We obviously have a number of really important and directive strategies. And so there has been a lot of effort in the last couple of years to make sure that our processes are accessible so that we can get comment on those particular things that are, impacting the spend that we've got. So, if I think about our place strategy or the housing strategy, there's intentionality that those things do pick up, so that we've got, when we hear an aspiration, it's got the right place to be outworked, rather than necessarily we hear and it doesn't go, or it doesn't have the right timing or the space to go somewhere. But I hear your point, Councillor. Sorry, Mayor Paula.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm not on mute, am I, Mark?
No, you're unmuted. You're doing well.
Excellent. It's a bit easier working from home than it was at the conference yesterday. However, in terms of this, to me, it's all about having, like you say, Andy, you just touched on it before, having that integration across all our policies. So that's where the real interface is between the people and implementation. Because we can meet with people, we can talk in groups. We've done advisory groups before, but unless they're tactical, they're not. The outcomes are not so good. That's where the age-friendly plan was quite good, because it had a certain allocated list of implementation actions decided to different people, which I do like. So whatever the right conduit to talk to people is, I'm fine with that, so long as we translate it into some tactics across the organisation. And that's the bit I want to see. And I'm really interested about best practice, and we should look outside of New Zealand as well to see what other similar cities do to connect with citizens who have disadvantages, because it's quite broad really when you start to define what that means. So it's spinning it on itself and talking about inclusivity and accessibility is more helpful than disability, and having a sector talk about disability. So I'd rather frame it in that way. And I'm looking for, I think the age-friendly city was a template of best practice, and so I'm looking for something similar in this space, personally. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Paula. Yeah, I agree with your aspirations there. So, Andy, just for example, there's talk about the Magical Bridge, for example. So, in an ideal world, this would come through this body and then spread to our departments, or how would that work?
So using that as an example, that probably sits really well in our play strategy, and some of those works there. From a policy perspective, we are really committed to our play spaces are usable for a majority of people. If I think of our council direction, that it's a place that all of us can thrive. It's a place that we can all find easy to live in. It's a place that there's fun things to do. So we've kind of got connections through there. From a monitoring and a storytelling, it could come through, either through the parks side if we were to develop that, or it could sit easily within a plan that we're working with our partners to see something like the Magical Bridge take place. So it kind of, I guess, in terms of that, it's a rāranga of strategies and policies, but I would hope that from a reporting perspective, our disability policy would pick up, or the report to the disability policy would pick up really those great projects that were happening, but they wouldn't necessarily all be owned by Judy, because they'd be owned by different parts of the business who are invested into making sure that our city is all of those things that we want it to be.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I guess from any time that there's going to be a large investment, it needs to sit with the owner of that. So if we're going to invest in the museum upgrade in terms of the entrance stuff, that has to sit well with our visitor destinations, and like that can't just be a side project that's disability focused. It has to be owned, and we want to make sure that we have our community's insights and lenses early on in the project, so that we don't have to retrofit anything. And then to that point as well, when we are talking about a disabled community, we're not talking about one form of impairment, and so there's a variety of things that have to be thought through and ticked. And we need to make sure from an internal perspective that our asset management plans are capturing all the opportunities before us, and that our project plans are equally got the right lenses happening early and during, and then checked off at the end. So there's a few different pieces that kind of work all together.
Yeah, cool. I can see Helen twitching there.
Sorry, I don't know how to put my hand up on Zoom. Sorry, I'll have to work that out. But yeah, I'm just a couple of key things that I'd like to speak to, having been a disability coordinator for 20 years before working for council. But I really agree with Paula around accessibility being our focus versus disability. When you universal design, and I mean Judy could obviously speak to all of this, when you make things accessible and easy for people with disability, you make it easy for a whole lot of people, including older people and people with pushchairs, etc. Another thing that I think is really key that Andy has talked about is using the mechanisms and structures that we already have in place. So we've been talking to the asset management team around actually having a section in our in our asset management plans that focus on accessibility, so that by the time we get to our LTP planning, units across council are really clear around, what their commitment to accessibility is, and then that should become visible through our LTP considerations, so that when we're putting things up, you've got a bit more visibility around what the projects that we're doing, what those accessible impacts are. And then, but linking all our asset management plans start with a strategic focus. So building accessibility into our strategy. So it's not Judy taking responsibility for disability or accessibility across our organisation, but it's each of our units are really clear around what their commitment is, and that's built into our asset management planning, our project planning. We're going to put a section into our project plans around accessibility as well. So there are existing mechanisms that we haven't been using optimally, that we can be using and reporting on through those processes.
Yeah, and if we are switching or moving it more to an accessibility focus, then that's going to have real strong implications, and good ones, for example, Access Hamilton, when we refresh that, for the age-friendly plan as well. Same sort of thing, isn't it? It's going to reach more than just our disabled sector as such.
Yes.
So if we do head towards more the accessibility angle, are the wellbeing still being reached? Are we still, for the entire disability sector, or are we dropping stuff off the side?
No, and I mean, it wouldn't. When you talk about accessibility, you wouldn't then exclude talking about disability, Judy. I think you're pretty big on that as well. That we still need to make sure that the disability community is visible in that. But in terms of our focus on what we do, it is around universal design and accessibility. Yeah, but we still always need to be making those communities visible. Disability community, older persons community.
Yeah.
Mark, you want me to comment?
Yeah, sure. Who said that? Where's that?
Oh, Judy here.
Oh, hey, Judy.
Hi, I've been listening into all of this. Great interest. If we take the accessibility approach to all councils' work, and it's not just projects, it's actually our systems as well. And a lot of our systems are reasonably accessible to a degree. But if we do take that accessibility approach, we need to make sure it includes everyone and not just the loudest voices, which is often my concern. And it's given equal status. So because we have to do one thing for one group that actually costs a lot more money than doing something simpler that may not quite meet that group's requirement, that's not a basis for doing something. It has to be quite equitable. And we've talked about equity of access for a long time. We don't want to lose that phrase, because I think that's not engaged in with a lot of other countries and councils. So universal design is the approach and possibly one way of going, but it's quite philosophical, and it can be up for debate in some circumstances. So we do really want to make sure that if we take an accessibility lens, that we've got some pretty well-grounded principles around access that we won't lose touch with.
Yeah.
Okay. When you say so, some voices are louder than others. I mean, can you give me an example of what sort of groups would miss out?
I think the sensory impairment group miss out a lot, Mark.
Okay.
We don't do a lot in the sensory impairment area. For instance, we're a bit short on tactiles in some prominent places.
Okay.
We're very short on any kind of accessible signage for deaf people and for low vision and blind people. And we also know that dual sensory impairment is on the increase as well. And that's because there's a lot of people who are living with either deafness or blindness, and they're living to be older, so they're actually acquiring the other sensory impairment that's adding complications to their lives hugely and stopping them from getting out and about as well. So, and it's expensive to do things for hearing impaired and deaf people, but their numbers are as great as people who have mobility impairments. They're the group that are often the most vocal.
Okay. Paula, are you still with us?
Yep.
So having heard what Judy said, rather, how does that tie in with your way of thinking around the accessibility focus?
Yeah, no, look, I would take that advice on board. And of course, Judy's the one that's most in touch every day with the community that we're talking about. I'm happy with that. I also think we should go create a platform, a wider platform for people to, have some sort of strategy that wider platform can tap into, which was, I hate to keep wiring on about the age friendly, but in a way, what happened there is, a working group really nutted it out, who were very rooted to that particular community of interest. But then it went broader to the wider community to help understand and inform it, how it could work successfully. And that's part of the success, all the other stakeholders that are in this game. So look, look, to be really frank, it's interesting because the most connection that we get, I have some connection with the deaf community through a group and bits and pieces, but the most connection we have is probably every 3 years when we get out amongst and we hear what's not quite going. And meanwhile, the staff, like Andy, it's your team that are moving amongst the community on an everyday basis. And I suspect with things like the broader arena, the community houses, there's a bigger picture than those who self-identify with disabled communities in one way or another, whether it's sight impaired, hearing impaired, physical disability, whatever it might be. I think there's a broader range that, we could tap into, which would bring a broader range, hopefully, of resources back to the table. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Kish, you had a question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Do we have we ever had similar to the age-friendly plan, but a disability action plan? And where does that sit?
So I guess we have been committed to making our city more accessible for a long time. So we've had a disability strategy sort of a couple of decades ago. We've got an action plan at the moment that really speaks to the work that we're involved in, and not so much of that wider community outside of where we've heard from particular community members and work that might be operationalized. So the last 3 years, we've done a lot of capacity building with some of our service providers. And as we talk about engagement and consultation and how do we make our programs accessible, we've ensured that we've got good links with organisations and communities to come back in. But so we have a 2-page action plan that has, I think, 25 actions on it currently. But that's up for debate on how do we communicate that better, or if so it meets everyone's needs.
Okay, and how will this policy feed into the diversity and inclusion strategy that's being worked on at the moment?
I need to come back to you exactly how that fits through. I know that there's a suite of diversity and inclusion policies that will fall out, and obviously a disability a policy or an accessibility or anything, it totally fits into that. I know that from what I've heard so far around our disability and inclusion stuff, there's a lot of focus on, again, what does it look like for us as an employer, as a workforce. And so trying to I haven't got a full picture for how does this sit in a hierarchy of things. Sorry, Kish, but I can come back to you.
That's fine. It's just with the diversity and inclusion policy, there'd be a lot of overlap because we are looking at, not only at ethnic groups, but also disability groups, the age-friendly plan, trying to bring it all under one umbrella instead of duplicating same principles. So that'll be quite interesting. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kish. I got to see Martin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, may have been covered before. Can Judy or Helen assist me in terms of our employment policies? One, in terms of encouraging people who may have certain disabilities to work for us, and number two, into our places of work environment, picking up all the total range. Could Helen or Judy just update me on that? Obviously, we do have a policy around that area from an employment point of view.
We are an EEO employer, but and we are working on our internal diversity inclusion policy. I mean, obviously, you can be an EEO employer, but you have a lot of indirect, discrimination, I guess. How accessible are buildings, looking at how people can access the workplace, how they're treated within the workplace. So as Kesh said, just the diversity and inclusion policy hopefully will pick up a lot of that, how we recruit and how we do recruitment and who we reach out to. So those are the kind of conversations that are happening internally at the moment. But I'll let Judy speak as well, but I think there's probably a fair way a fair bit of work we could do in that area still.
Yeah, I think there is. We don't actually keep data around who's disabled and who's not, mainly because people do not have to disclose it. They need to disclose health issues when they're applying for positions, but not their disability. But that doesn't mean to say we're not opposed to having disabled people on staff. We just don't know how many people there are. We do know that recently a young lad who uses a wheelchair is working down in customer service, so that's good. He got that job on merit, and that's how jobs should be got. So again, I don't think he had any issues or problems around how council did the employment process with him. So I think our processes are really good around inclusion, accommodation, and we've got well-skilled staff, because a lot of them have done the disability awareness training over the years, so they're not frightened about asking the awkward questions or getting information what they need to make something work. And so that's all useful for a lot of people if they've had that training as well. So they've sort of got narrow beginnings, but they're much wider endings. And I think the staff training is a good training, and it would be good if we could perhaps offer it to elected members at some stage as well, so that they get a feel for the types of things that disability, accessibility, universal design, those sorts of things, they're actually really specialist. And so while some other plans like the age-friendly plan is quite generic around a specific population group, disability goes across every part of the population, and so it cuts across everyone's lives at some stage, and it's not just limited to a group of people.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Martin. All right. Sorry, mate. You got another question?
No, I just make the observation that's really, really helpful, and I think what I want to see is always that checklist. So when we're doing this area, we keep reminding ourselves what we are like as an employer, what our workspaces are like in terms of accommodating, atypical, people with different needs. But thank you, Judy and Helen. That's incredibly useful.
Good stuff. Thank you. Look, last question from you, Paula, and then we'll wrap it up. And hopefully, Andy, you've got some kind of directional steer.
Just one really super quick one, because I see also Martin's got his hand up. In terms of this, there's, what Judy was just saying before was very interesting to me, because there's people who have obvious disadvantages. You can see it. It's there. And then there are people who have less visible disadvantages. So it's not just about the ones that, say, even autism, something like that. So it's not necessarily just reaching out to those who've already identified as having a disability of some form, but also those who don't necessarily identify or explicitly express themselves that way, but may need support and encouragement to be, included in our community. So that's why I say about casting, whatever it starts of, you always got to have a core team with passion and knowledge and experience. You've got to cast your net wider after that, because you don't know who you're missing otherwise. And there is, when I remember visiting recently the neurological building in Frankton, you know, when the dementia Waikato used to be, and now they've got Parkinson's, dementia, every neurological horrible disease you could ever think of being dealt with from that one hub. So you'd want to include them because they're doing all neurological disabilities as well. So how do we reach out to those groups as well?
Can I say a big part of this is around changing perceptions in education. So one of the reasons people often don't disclose if it's not a visible disability is fear of discrimination within the workplace, or that they may not get the job because of perceptions. So, I mean, that's a big part of the work that will fall out of the diversity and inclusion policy within council, is around, you know, helping us understand the skills and experience that people bring to roles. And changing people's perceptions and understanding of impairment and disability and the strengths that exist within that.
It's really good, Andy. I'd hope that you guys are working close with David Bryant and the health and wellbeing, the great work that he's doing as well, because there's quite a lot of dovetailing, isn't there, internally. That's really interesting. Really, so it could become an asset. Hey guys, we've pretty much run out of time. I hope that gives you a rough steer. So fairly heavy steer on the accessibility front. Keeping the channels open and moving into the mental wellbeing and not so obvious disability stakes as well. I think that kind of sums it up a little bit.
Yeah,
so.
Thank you for your time. And if anyone wakes up in the middle of the night and goes, I really forgot to say this, please don't hesitate to drop me an email or have a phone call. You know, we're happy to do this offline as well if there's other things that rise up amongst you. So
any time at night, like if we wake up at 2:30 sort of thing?
And feel free to drop the email at 2:30. And we'll come back to you in a timely manner.
Good on you, pal.
Thanks,
Andy.